Hello, and you're very welcome back to Good Morning Belfield. We are now joined by Ollie Reid to talk about the budget and the implications, I guess, on the average student. So, Ollie, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Not at all, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So, we're going to start, first of all, with kind of a vague question I'm going to pose on you is budget good or bad?
It really depends on... the short answer is irrelevant. There's absolutely no fundamental change. You get small increase across the board. No one's been affected negatively by the budget, but at the same time, again, for students, no real dramatic effect either way.
That's true.
Minor benefits. I mean, one main thing for students would be the minimum wage has gone up by 10 cents as of the 1st of January 2017.
Okay.
But if you equate that to working 30 hours a week, it's what, €12 in a month. So
Yeah.
it's irrelevant.
Nothing major.
No, not
Might
at
get you a packet of cigarettes.
Packet of smokes.
Yeah.
One thing I guess that the budget kind of avoided, and I mean it was a positive note, was that fees obviously weren't increased, and that's something that the students' unions around the country are trying to lobby for, is that there does be no increase in fees. But you know, do you see yourself? And I know this is quite a in-depth question to kind of begin the interview, but fees is very relevant to students these days. Do you reckon that we'll have an increase in fees, or do you think we're going to stay at the 3,000 mark?
Well, the other thing I read about it recently was Richard Bruton stated that there wouldn't be any increase this year and unlikely to be an increase next year. Going back, I think you referenced the fact that I was a mature student or not at the very beginning of the show. It is a dramatic increase in the registration fees. Now it's €3,000. Back in the early 2000s, when I would have originally gone to college, it was approximately like £500, which is €625, €635. So it's
Month's rent.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a very, very dramatic increase. The thing, I wouldn't want to, state this for every single student who might be, coming from a family or a background that is financially, hard done by, or not hard done by, but, has, financial difficulties. But generally, all my fees are paid for by the Susie grant. So, I mean, it doesn't affect me personally, but if you're struggling to pay €3,000 and it's going to go up to, €3,200, which is a typical increase in the fees, it is something that you'd have to be concerned by. But again, generally, if you're if you've got those financial difficulties, you will qualify for the grant, which is a great help. I wouldn't be able to go to college without it.
Yeah, I know in our first 3 years of college, the fees went up by €750, I think €250 each.
Yeah, there was a gradual
which
increase.
is
that year.
like it's a big increase, like over
Very
it's
much
like
so.
pretty short period.
Yeah.
Short time frame.
I mean, it had to come to a stop eventually, and I
So-
guess from being at Students' Union Council there, another Students' Union plug in the show, Lexi Kilmartin, the education officer, was discussing the different plans to impose for the future. There was a number of things such as kind of the loan, and it wasn't. I don't think it was called the loan repayment scheme. It could have been something like that, whereby basically we don't have to pay anything, and then obviously when we graduate, within a year or two of graduating, we have to pay whatever we've accumulated.
Similar to the UK system, is it?
Yeah, I feel so. And then there was another thing of just keeping it the way it is, and then she was talking about free fees altogether. But that could be maybe a discussion for another day, and hopefully you won't have to discuss about any changes in the near future regarding fees.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed anyway from reading through the budget implications were landlords, which is obviously very relevant to students who are in housing off campus. Landlords were given a 5% mortgage interest relief, and also on top of that, homeowners who rent rooms, so that would essentially be digs, for 14,000 or below a year, have to pay no taxes on that. So that's kind of a positive, I guess, for students looking for accommodation.
It is, but at the same time, it's not that dramatic an increase. It was 12, now it's 14. From my personal experience, I'd be reluctant to encourage landlords, people coming into it. How can I put it? Sorry, reluctant landlords. So to be a good landlord, you really need to be on the ball. I wouldn't be too in favour of having students lumped in with people who can make an extra bob or two, simply because an income tax rate band has been expanded. I think you're just getting into territory where you're going to have a lot more shoddy landlords in the market dealing with students and taking advantage of students who may not know what their tenants' rights are. I know that I was disappointed when I looked at the budget, because there was there's no measures made for increase in security of tenure. If you look at the German rental market, for the sake of argument, the whole basis of the German rental market is security of tenure for the tenant, and the landlord really has to shape their view on the tenancy agreement around that. In Ireland, it's far less geared towards the tenant's rights. Now, it has been improved. The Residential Tenancies Act had an amendment in, it was December of last year, or December maybe 2014, one or the other, but it increased the gap between rent reviews. So now rent can only be increased once every 2 years, and it increased the amount of notice that landlord has to give you. So even from a student's perspective, it may not be that relevant during one academic year if you're going to move around or move from on-campus accommodation elsewhere, but I would have liked to see measures like that included in the budget.
It's definitely a far cry from any dramatic change in that sector.
Yeah.
You're listening to Good Morning Belfield here. We have Ollie, Reid, and we're talking about the budget.
So one of the things I came across that I thought was quite interesting was I saw that I read that some €1 billion a year will be put aside from 2018 onwards for a rainy day fund. What do you think would make a nice rainy day fund if you have €1 billion? €1 billion.
I don't know if this is me trying to be funny or an invitation for me to be funny, because I'm not really.
But what do they genuinely mean by that?
I think it's for Brexit.
Okay.
It's Brexit, because obviously we don't know. The term I really am enjoying hearing on a regular basis at the moment is hard Brexit or soft Brexit.
Or Brexit means Brexit.
Yeah.
Because Brexit is itself a made-up word, so it's not really clarifying anything.
I mean, Michael Noonan himself admitted that they don't know what is going to happen. It's you can never predict with the economics.
Mm-hmm.
You can do your best, but it's never going to be something that you're going to be able to predict with any unerring accuracy. But Brexit is going to be an absolute disaster one way or another, hard or soft, whatever way you want to put it. We have to anticipate that, or that's what that money is for in effect. If there's going to be increased export costs due to the value of sterling falling. Mm-hmm. Among other things, I won't claim to be an expert on it, but I think that's what it's for, ostensibly. We'll see if it remains to be the case.
That's interesting. I was wondering what that meant. And other changes to students, I didn't come across much. I saw that the guards will start recruiting.
Yeah.
800 jobs, I think, in fact.
I think 4,500 in the public sector, of which 800 for guards and 2,400 are for teachers. So, I mean, if you're looking for students, you have students that are, a student listening now could be a first year student who, lives at home in Dublin with their parents, and, it doesn't really matter to them, if there's, decrease the USC or anything like that. On the other hand, you might have master students who are graduating, who've getting their HDips and are looking to get into education. So things like 2,400 public sector jobs as teachers are to be welcomed. Another one for the education sector, though, is that €36.5 million has been allotted for the third level sector. What that is going to be spent on remains to be seen. It's nice to say €36.5 million being thrown into a sector, but when you divide it across the amount of third level institutions in the country, and if it's just going to go and increase wages for academic staff, or if it's going to be pumped into improving library facilities or something else, again, that hasn't been clarified.
Yeah, and I think it was promised to those relatively high up in the education sector that there would be more of an increase than 36.5 million, and actually that ties in quite well with UCD holding a demonstration on Wednesday, and actually I think they've requested to President Andrew Deeks that any class or any labs tutorials that may be mandatory for students should not be counted on Wednesday. I think they've got the go ahead with that, so there will be a demo to save our library from cuts and join national demo for increased funding. Sorry, I read that. I thought that was going to be worded rather differently. And this is obviously being held by students in UCD. They're meeting at 1 p.m. I think it is at the Garden of Remembrance in Dublin there. So I would advise people to try and get out, because I mean, we've kind of in the last several years gone away from the kind of student activism side of things, and historically that is how we got things done here in the union. Not saying that, or in the union and the college, not saying directly that it's going to change the world as such, but I think the more a turnout we have at that, the more that we'll get the ministers and those higher up in the Dáil thinking about students and education.
I would